We all have significant life events that are very personal. And I guess a lot of people would think of a significant life event when they met their significant other. Others would probably think of the time when they achieved a qualification, or maybe something like you learn how to drive and you suddenly pass and you got the freedom to be able to get around. Others would think of a significant moment in their life when they witnessed a tragedy. A lot of us would remember very vividly where we were when we first saw the planes strike the towers at 9/11. It's a significant time that is imprinted in our minds. Others would remember where they were and how they got news about difficult situations with regards to loved ones. They all impact our life, those kind of significant moments. And what is true in life is also true in our spirituality. And in our spirituality, we have, again, significant moments. For everyone, it's the moment where they started following Jesus, where they heard and understood and received the good news invitation that Jesus gives to us to be his disciples. Others would remember significant moments in their lives when they got baptized, for example, and they went into the waters of baptism and they made a public declaration of their faith as an adult, that they would follow Jesus for the rest of their lives. Others still would remember incredible answers to prayer, or situations where they've been healed by God, or situations where they shared the good news with a friend or a relative, and those people started following Jesus as a result of that. Other people would remember a significant call to mission or ministry in their life. And all those moments are real significant turning points, and we all have them in our lives as part of our experience, and we can all look back to them and speak very fondly of them. One of the things that I think is significant about those events in our lives, for me, it's the quality of those kind of experiences is measured by the impact that it has following the event. In other words, I can tell if, spiritually speaking, I have an experience with God or of God that is really authentic by the impact it has on my life subsequent to that experience. So what happens after? What are the fruits? What are the results? What's the so what that comes after that experience? And this is what I want us to explore tonight, of how Easter actually had a so what upon some people's lives, how it impacted them, what fruit it brought, because to me it validates the experience of meeting the resurrected Jesus by how lives have been changed as a result of that. We see, Easter is this great miracle that brings great good news that Jesus had risen from the dead, and everything that he had said and everything that he had done were truthful. And based on that truth, really we can follow him. N.T. Wright, talking about the resurrection of Jesus, writes these things. Easter has burst into our world, the world of space and time and matter, real history and real people and real life. But our minds and imaginations are too small to contain it. So we do our best to put the sea into a bottle and to fit the explosive fact of the resurrection into the possibilities of what we already know about. It's so hard to comprehend the resurrection, N.T. Wright is saying. We can't really fathom fully everything that happened there. But what helps us to understand is the impact it had upon some people's lives. So let me read to you Luke chapter 24 about the encounter that people have with the resurrected Jesus. From verse 13 onwards. Now that same day, two of them, that's two disciples, were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor in Jerusalem, and do you not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find a body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women said, but him they did not see." Then Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village in which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared out of their sight. They asked each other, "Were our hearts not burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. Simply put, these two were seriously impacted by their encounter with Jesus. You see, they'd been so discouraged. They felt, once again, like we were looking this morning at Mary's life, like the rug had been pulled from under their feet, and all their expectation about Jesus being the deliverer, Messiah, had just been quashed. And all their dreams had been shattered. They were just filled with discouragement about what they believed in, probably fears about what was going to happen to them if Jesus had been crucified, and a lot of anxiety about the future. What are we going to do? We put our faith and trust in him. And then they have this encounter with Jesus, whom they don't initially recognize. And at the end of the story, you find two fired up people, passionate about the encounter they had with Jesus and passionate about telling others about the fact that he's alive. That's the kind of transformation I'm talking about. That's the kind of encounter that we are longing for. They asked each other, verse 32 says, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" I don't know about you, but I am longing to have that kind of an experience. I am praying that this Easter and once again meeting with the resurrected Jesus would have the same effect on my heart as it had upon their hearts, to fire me up and hopefully to fire all of us up to be able to pass on the good news to other people, just as we have experienced it in Jesus. I need this now. I need this fresh passion. I need to be fired up. But how did it happen? Well, here's the first thing. It didn't come from themselves. They couldn't stir up that passion. They couldn't feel that fire in their hearts on their own. They couldn't do it themselves. All they have is empty hearts, discouragement. There was no residue of hope in there. They were downcast. And sometimes you and I can feel like that. There's just nothing left. There's no hope, there's no optimism, there's no encouragement, particularly in our current setting. We could think to ourselves, it just feels like it's doom and gloom. And those disciples had nothing within themselves to be able to stir up that fresh passion. They faced a grim reality. Not just betrayal about the past, disappointment in the present, anxiety about the future, but just everything, the whole picture of life seemed to just shatter in many pieces. There was nothing within them to be able to stir up fresh passion. It didn't come from themselves. All they had in themselves was just a big void. And if anything else, just a lot of negative disappointment that wouldn't have stirred up any fresh passion. They probably either forgot the promises of Jesus or just disbelieved them. And once again, I can identify myself with those disciples. How often we forget the promises that he made to us. And many times maybe we even remember them, but we just don't believe them. And if you want to have a pathway to receiving that fresh passion, let me tell you, it's not within me, it's not within you. As much as we're trying to look for it within ourselves, we will end up being disappointed because it just isn't there. And that's an okay place to be. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to have those resources. It's okay to feel disappointed because that paves the way for Jesus to come through. And while the first thing was this, it didn't come from themselves, it came through Jesus. That's the second thing. It came through Jesus. It came through that encounter with Jesus. It all started, that fresh fire, that fresh passion starts through that encounter with Jesus. I love the fact that Jesus is the one that takes the initiative. A lot of the times I feel the burden that I'm not pressing in hard enough into following Jesus. Here's the good news. Even when we don't do that, he is coming after us in the most beautiful way. He's coming after us. He's coming after those disciples. And you know what's amazing about them? They weren't leaders as far as we know. They weren't the significant ones whose names we know. They weren't one of the gospel writers. And yet Jesus comes to meet with them in their situation of disappointment. And that brings me so much hope. Because many times I feel I don't measure up. I don't feel I'm one of the who's who. And here is the good news. Jesus is coming to look for those that are just like me. Not the who's who. Not the amazing people. And he takes the initiative and comes to look for them. I love the way that the transformation comes as he walks with them, talks with them, asking questions, listening, and then he eats with them. Everything about this encounter with Jesus hinges on that backbone of our discipleship life, relationship, intimacy. Many people miss the point on what Christianity is all about because they think it's about religion. It's about doing things for God. And Jesus comes, the resurrected Jesus comes and shows us even through this, that this isn't about us doing things for God, but it is about God doing things for us and in us and through us. And it's all in the context of relationship, where Jesus is walking with them, talking with them, listening to them, eating with them. It's all about relationship. And it's in that relational setting where initially they don't realize who he is, but suddenly the penny drops and they realize when he breaks that bread, maybe there was a reminder of the upper room. They realized it was Jesus. And that realization changes their lives. So passion doesn't come from themselves. Passion comes through Jesus. Passion comes, here's the third thing, through the scriptures. I love the way that Jesus is spending time opening the scriptures up with them. He goes to some of the prophecies from the Old Testament. It says here, did not Christ have to suffer these things and enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. I love the way that the fresh passion, even in this encounter with Jesus, comes not just through the encounter with him, but through the encounter with him, even through the scriptures. As Jesus is encouraging them to rediscover again the promises that were made and how they were to be fulfilled. The scriptures have this incredible capacity of fueling our passion. The scriptures are like truth that brings clarity into a confusing world. When we don't know what to do, when we don't know how to make our decisions, when we have these questions, opening the scriptures, reading them, meditating, learning about them, it will allow them to impact us with a truth that gives direction in life. But the scriptures aren't just about truth, they also feed us. They are words that feed our souls. They bring the nourishment that actually brings health into our souls. And Jesus almost feeds them through those scriptures, bringing them increasing health into their souls, because that's what the scriptures do. The scriptures are like a light, the psalmist is saying, that lights up our path. Again, when we don't really know where to go and where to turn, when we feel like everything is bleak, and at times our current circumstances, you just feel like somebody switched the light off, and you're thinking, what on earth is going on? What will happen afterwards when we get through this tunnel? And the scriptures are the light that guides us, even in times like this. So Jesus, in his encounter, is giving of himself relationally, but he's also opening up the scriptures because he knows the scriptures have that power to bring about fresh passion in our lives. The fourth thing is this: community, or one another. It came through community. I love the fact that the two are talking to each other. So after Jesus had gone, it says they asked each other, were our hearts not burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures for us? And then he says they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem, and there they found the 11 and those with them, and they were saying, and then the two told them what happened on the way. Fresh passion. We get fired up spiritually when we understand that this comes through community, through spending time with each other, through encouraging one another. For them, it was a sense of confirmation. As they were talking about it, they said, did this really happen? Yes, it did. Yes, it did. It showed that it was true. But also for them, it carried an element of mission. The words that they received, they were not just for themselves, but they were to be used to be taken to others, to encourage their brothers and sisters, and to provide the good news to those who didn't know Jesus, absolutely desperately need it. So this is an amazing pathway that you see in those people's lives. It didn't come from themselves. It came from Jesus. It came through the scriptures, and it came through fellowship or community of believers. That's how spiritual passion is being fueled up. One morning near the turn of the 20th century, Bramwell Booth, he was the son of William Booth, came to see his elderly father. William Booth, of course, was the founder of the Salvation Army. The elder Booth was quite stern and quite cold on that morning. He didn't even bother saying anything to him, even greeting him. The only thing that he said to him is this: Bramwell, did you know that men slept out all night on the bridges? See, the previous night, Booth Sr. arrived from a southern town into London and had to cross London to reach his home. And when what he had seen on the midnight return accounted for this morning tornado that was there, because he'd seen so many people sleeping rough. Did you know that men slept out all night on the bridges? Well, yes, says Bramwell. A lot of poor fellows, I suppose, do that. Then you ought to be ashamed of yourself, to have known it and to have done nothing to them, he went on vehemently, as he was speaking about the difficulties that those people that were already burdened with their poverty. And he was trying to find all sorts of excuses, saying, look, I'm already busy trying to do work about the poor law and sorting things out. And the father stopped him again. Go and do something. What can we do? Give them shelter. That will cost money. Well, that is your affair. Something must be done. Get hold of a warehouse and warm it and find something to cover them. But mind, Bramwell, no coddling. That was passion. That was somebody who became fired up by a vision of what Jesus could do for people in need. That was the very beginning of the Salvation Army shelters. This is what happens when you meet the risen Jesus. The two on the road to Emmaus experienced it in their own life, and they were fired up to go and tell others about Jesus. William Booth had met the risen Jesus, and he was so fired up about touching other people's lives. What about me and you? I don't know about you, but I know about me. And I am desperately hungry for the resurrected Jesus on this Easter Sunday to fire me up afresh, to obey him and to touch other people's lives. I'm praying that the Spirit of God would fall afresh on us on this Easter Sunday, bringing greater passion for him, the resurrected one, and greater desire to fulfill his purposes. And that's what would make this Easter Sunday absolutely memorable. That's why that encounter afresh with Jesus could bring about fruit that is everlasting, impacting many people's lives. Allow me to pray with us as we close. Holy Spirit, we thank you that on a day like this, we can celebrate the risen Jesus. What a joy. We have a God that isn't dead. We are filled with hope because we have a Savior who is so alive. And not just alive, but he reigns triumphantly on his throne. And I pray that you will continue to touch our hearts again, afresh, with that sense of encountering him. Fuel our love for him and intimacy with him. That in these days that we have extra time not being at work, that we would press into greater intimacy with him. I pray that you'll give us a fresh love for the scriptures, that the scriptures might become that truth and light and bread that will sustain that passion and fuel it even further. And I pray that we will not neglect being together in community with others, where we can encourage one another to be those people who are passionate for the risen Jesus, passionate to glorify him, passionate to make him known and have other people's lives changed by the good news. So we surrender to you afresh, and we'll long for that fresh touch from you that will enable us to be fired up. Amen. Amen.